She looked down the side of the mountain and swallowed. The day was clear, and the wind whipped the air around her, making the precarious path even more intimidating. It was expected of her, though. It had always been expected of her. Her mother, after all, was a legend. She could dance across the crags, twirling in the bright sunlight or the cold rain, moving with a subtle grace that everyone else could only stare at and marvel, eyes full of envy at a talent they could only wish for. Her mother was a generational genius, lauded far and wide as the greatest walker in who knows how many lifetimes. Stories were sung of her mother, and will be sung for generations to come. Naturally, she was expected to be great too. Not as great as her mother, of course. Not at first, certainly, and probably never. No one really expected her to ever exceed or even match her mother. But still, the child of such a prodigy, she would have to be a wonder herself, worthy of her own story and songs, wouldn't she? So she had practiced, and she had danced, and she had walked the crags and the cliffs, and here she stood, on the steepest, on the narrowest, on the highest. All her people were waiting and watching to see how she would dance on the edge. As she prepared to leap, to fly through the air and the wind and the sun, suddenly she stopped instead, and turned to gaze into the crowd. Her mother stared back at her with a worried, sad look. Her mother had been fearless. That had been her secret. That was the great story of why she could dance the crags so freely. And then she decided to be fearless too. So she leapt away from the cliffs, and down the mountains, and away from the path that others had set for her, through the grass and the stones, and everyone stared jaws slack as she leapt off of their expectations and onto her own path.